You're listening to The Phillip Jordan Show, a show with compelling conversations on local, SEC, and national sports stories. Connect with Phillip on social media at PJordanSEC. Now, the self-proclaimed Wiregrass Podfather, Phillip Jordan.
What's up, y'all? Welcome into the Phillip Jordan Show, brought to you by Wiregrass Daily News and Digio Strategies. I am your host, Phillip Jordan, in-studio host and producer of Nothing Was Football on 96.9, The Legend. Got a fun show planned for you guys today. I'm going to be joined by Barry McKnight, kind of an annual thing we do early July, talk with Barry, preview the upcoming season for Troy football. So I think you guys will enjoy that conversation. Before we bring Barry on, let you guys know you can find me in the podcast. Find me on social media at PJordanSEC. Podcast available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you leave just 4 stars, you're just a straight-up hater. You can also check out the show over at Wiregrass Daily News. Watch the show on the Wiregrass Daily News Facebook page and over my YouTube accounts. One is Phillip Jordan Sports. Email me at sports.phillipjordan@gmail.com. Now let's jump into it with Barry McKnight. Alrighty, as I mentioned off the top, I'm joined by Barry McKnight, voice of the Troy Trojans. Also check out the Trojan Talk podcast. You can check out his interviews there. He's pretty much interviewed every coach on the current staff. But Barry, we do this once a year at this time, and I always appreciate it.
It's always fun. At this time of year, there's always 2 or 3 things that get me, into the framework of, okay, now it's time to start getting ready. Once the Independence Day weekend is over, once I get my Phil Steele preseason football preview magazine, and once I talk to you, I know it's about that time to start, cracking the knuckles and, getting the voice ready, because it's about that time.
So it's basically when you hear from 2 Phils, when you get your Phil magazine and then the podcaster down in Dothan texts you, it's getting close. So,
and it's every year is different, and this year's probably more different than quite a few of the years. A lot of questions, a lot of new names for me to try to get used to, a lot of new faces and stuff as well. It happens pretty much this time every year anyway, but because of the transfer portal over the last couple of years, and because, the new coach this year, there's a lot of new names. I've got my work cut out for me.
Yeah, the portal thing, it's amazing because, we're going to talk about Coach Sumrall a little bit and to start off, but when he took over, the portal was there, but it's amazing how just in those 2 years, how it's even more, wild in some sense when a coach leaves and another one comes in, how many people come and go, because I don't think it was like that when he came to Troy initially.
Well, whenever he got here, and he did such a good job. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that, to Sun Belt Conference championships. I think one of the secondary motives for him being interested in the jobs, maybe further down than secondary, is the fact that this thing was built for success. I mean, he stepped in, and the names. You have at that time a 5th year, later a 6th year senior quarterback on the roster. You have the best running back that's ever played at Troy on the roster. You had some incredible defensive players, including the guy who was the most productive defensive player in Troy history. And you had a pretty good schedule, and you knew that you had a pretty good chance of being successful from the get-go if you can keep everybody here. And that was kind of a battle. I mean, it's always a battle everywhere, every season. This past year, with 2 straight Sun Belt championships, a lot of the losses that Troy has had has been because of graduation. And there have been a couple of people who have gone on to more NIL money and with a Power 5 program. But it's still remarkable how many people just buy in, not just to the coaching staff, but to the school and to the program and to the people and to the fans. Troy's been very fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Just in looking back at his 2 years at Troy, and you mentioned it, the 2 Sun Belt titles. I mean, Coach Parker talked about in his press conference. He gets there and there's a goalpost missing. He wants to. If you get to the end of the year and you're missing a goalpost, that was a really good year you had that season. But when you just look back at the 2 years Coach Jon Sumrall had at Troy, what was different about him? Why was he able to, look, they had 3 years, wasn't great years for Troy. He comes in, wins back-to-back Sun Belt titles. What was it about Coach Sumrall that equaled that success?
Well, one of the things, and it's no reflection on any prior coach, because those coaches left a lot of good football players at Troy, particularly, on the defensive side. But you and I talked about this maybe last year, maybe year before. I know we've talked about it, in that, when Coach Lindsey was here, they were so close. They had so many games that came within a score, so many games that came within a final minute or something like that, that just didn't go their way. Well, particularly 2 years ago in 2022, when Sumrall got here, Troy led the nation with the best record in single score games in the country. Those games that Troy had just been losing for the past 3 years, now all of a sudden became wins. Why was that? Maybe a little bit more talent. Well, definitely a little bit more talent, but also a little bit more culture, a little bit more, I don't want to say mental toughness, but however you phrase that, those close losses, all of a sudden, with many of those same circumstances, became close wins. And with those close wins came a little bit more belief in yourself. Last year, there were questions. Can they do it again? You're losing Carlton Marshall. You're losing Will Cholo. You're losing Rajay Johnson. You're losing, some really good offensive linemen. Can you do it again? Well, again, you start out 1-2, you win a couple of games really close, and then that belief comes again. That defense really gels and didn't give up hardly anything for the rest of the regular season. I think more than anything else, if there's a common factor, which is what you're asking, in the success over the last 2 years as opposed to before, it's just culture. It's just mental toughness and belief in yourself. The football was really good, but the football's good every week, everywhere in the Sun Belt Conference. I just think a lot of it was mental, in really kind of establishing week after week a little bit more belief in what you're doing and how you're being coached and what it takes to win.
Yeah, and it's interesting now when we look into Coach Parker, Gerad Parker coming in, it's kind of a different scenario. He's coming into a program that's been winning championships. And what's your initial take on him so far as the Troy head coach?
Well, the two things that I've really liked, and again, it's no comparison to any of the coaching staffs, Coach Sumrall's or Coach Lindsey's or anybody's. What he has really done more than anything else is embrace the challenge. I mean, he realizes, again, he probably one of the main reasons why he took the job is because Troy not only has been successful, but expects success, expects to be successful. You got to embrace that, and he has done that. The other thing is, I think he's done a really good job of hiring assistant coaches. I think these guys are really something, maybe on par with last year, the last 2 years. And he has really done a good job of identifying where the thin spots are and going out with talent acquisition. I mean, immediately. You look at some of the losses Troy has had personnel-wise. No more Gunnar Watson, no more Kamani Vidal, no more Javon Solomon, no more Del Pettis, no more Reddy Stewart, no more O'Shea Fletcher, no more Don Callis, no more Ershot. I can go on and on. They lost a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But they did a really good job of plugging a lot of those holes, moving some people around. I think, again, just hitting the ground running and embracing what the expectations are in hiring assistant coaches. And these are some top quality guys, and doing what I think is really a good job of talent acquisition in some of the holes that Troy has gotten. It hasn't taken him long, but I think this has the look, at least, of a team that could, again, compete for a championship despite all the different personnel.
Yeah, and you talk about the assistants, and the Sean Reagan hire, I think, was a really popular one. And I had Brandon Silvers on the show not too long after that hire, and Brandon just talked on air and off air greatly about Coach Reagan. And you look at all these quarterbacks that have come through Troy in the last 10 plus years. Most of them were coached by him. I mean, he had coached Watson, and he has experience from previous stop with Goose Crowder. What was your reaction when you saw that as one of the hires for Coach Parker?
Well, you knew when he was at Troy before that he was really kind of a quarterback whisperer, but he had not been the coordinator. Remember, Neil Brown called the plays. There was never going to be any question about that. And when he went to West Virginia with him, Neil called the play. This is the next evolution for Sean Reagan, is to be the offensive coordinator, although Gerad Parker is, he's a coordinator himself, and he will be a play caller as well. But this is something where, it's in the title, it's in some of the expectations and some of the game planning. What he has done, which has always struck me, is he is really insightful at maximizing a quarterback's strengths and minimizing his weaknesses. I think of Brandon Silvers, who was a great example. Neil Brown said for the last 2 years he was at Troy, he was the best quarterback in the league. He didn't do anything super flashy. He was not, aerial circus, throw it all over the lot kind of a guy, but he got it where it was supposed to be with some authority. He checked into the right calls and everything, perfect for that system. Goose Crowder, I'll go ahead and say it, he's not even been named the starting quarterback, but he has those same types of tendencies. And he's been with Coach Reagan before, as you mentioned, when they were at West Virginia together. It's still an open quarterback battle, but I think Goose is one of those kind of guys. Plus, Coach Reagan gets Troy. He has been and will continue to be a really good asset amongst the high school coaches and the high school players, just simply because he understands and he can represent Troy to them, what it really means, because he's been here so long. Caleb Carbine is another guy, the offensive line coach, who can really do a good job with that. Gary Banks, the wide receiver coach. Those are guys who get Troy, who understand what it is about Troy that makes it special and makes it successful. And those are guys who are really going to be able to use that to draw in some more talent along the high school ranks.
Just a side note, just talking about Brandon Silvers, when you talk about what kind of quarterback he is, that all those attributes is why we keep seeing him on a team somewhere in these leagues, like he was in the UFL or XFL, AAF. Mm-hmm. I mean, because I'm sure, what he was at Troy has translated into somebody I believe a lot of teams believe they can rely on with him. And that's what we see. And if we get out of Goose Crowder, I think Troy should be very excited if that's the case.
Well, what I loved about Brandon is that, he was a very clinical quarterback. Like I said, he'll get the ball where it's supposed to be without a lot of fanfare. He'll identify it, get it there, and get it to the playmakers and let them do their thing. But he also had some swagger to him. He wasn't just, a robot back there, get it here, get it there, move it on. He had some swagger. I remember the Appalachian State game in Troy in 2017 when Sidney Davis made that terrific fourth down catch at the Vet. Brandon was the coolest guy in the stadium. He was the least excited human being at the Vet that day. He did that stuff all the time. Again, got it where it was supposed to be. But when the chips were down, you knew that he was going to find a way to get it done. And I do see a little bit of that same swagger from Goose Crowder. Still has to do it, but I do see some similarities.
Yeah, and I'll transition into running back after this. But about Brandon Silverstone, the one I have enjoyed in those leagues, because they interview him on the sideline during the game. You get a good idea what his personality is too, because he's usually in and out pretty quick with them questions. It's straight to the point. He doesn't sugarcoat anything, which is always a joy.
Yes.
With him, and he's been that way when I've had him on the podcast before. He tells you exactly what he thinks and doesn't hold anything back.
Yeah.
Running back, you mentioned Kamani Vidal. Record breaker there at Troy, replacing him. I mean, we had that record for when he rushed for 50 yards. Troy was pretty much almost unbeatable.
Yeah, I think they lost twice in his entire career when he rushed for 50 yards or more. Give him the ball.
Yeah, just feed him the rock and good things were going to happen, and they always did most of the time there for Troy. But Damian Taylor, he's a guy with a lot of experience. They bring in the Eastern Carolina transfer in Gerald Green. How are you seeing when you look at this roster with the running backs?
Well, Damian he's built a lot like Kimani. He doesn't, he's not Kimani. He's a different kind of a player. Kimani was a slasher. Damian likes to run through you if he can. But I think what will help Damian is he's got He's got a guy like Gerald Green who has some experience in this league, who can, kind of like an Asa Martin maybe from last year, who can come in and provide carries, and maybe, who knows, take the job. But there's also a couple of other guys out there. Jarvis Williams, the guy from Mobile, he's a home run guy. He's a guy that can take it the distance when he gets a chance. He just hasn't had many chances. Not many do when Kamani's back there. And there's always, I submit to the Troy fans to remember this, because there were 3 freshmen last year when I talked to Jon Sumrall on Trojan Talk and, in some of the other interviews we do, that he always talked about. And one of them was Jordan Lovett, who was a redshirt last year from Statesboro, Georgia. We had Sumrall on at Trojan Talk. We had just gotten done live with Javon Solomon. He was over off to the side and listening. And Coach Sumrall said, you got to watch out for Jordan Lovett. He hasn't played because we're redshirting him, but boy, he is hard to tackle. He looked over and said, isn't he, Javon? And I remember looking at Javon's going, yes. So watch out for Jordan Lovett. He also mentioned an offensive lineman named Elijah Prather, who was handling a lot of the defensive linemen last year. Again, a redshirt guy, could be a tackle, left side, right side, still working for that. And he also mentioned a defensive end bandit player named Malachi Pegues, another guy who redshirted last year from Oxford, Mississippi, that he really, really likes. So if those are some of the positions, obviously, where there have been some personnel losses. Running back, along the offensive line, and at defensive end with no more Solomon and no more Richard Jubinar out there. Those are guys who can come in, and you're looking, I know the fans are looking at other guys stepping up, guys from the junior college ranks, transfer guys and everything. But don't forget about these 3 guys who kind of not only, bided their time and paid their dues last year and redshirted, but stuck with Troy during the coaching change as well. Those may be 3 names that we talk about a lot this fall.
Yeah, you talking about love it. If Javon Solomon is saying that about you, that is high praise.
If Javon says you're tough to tackle, good enough for me, Phillip. That's all I need to know.
Because tackling was not something he struggled at Troy. So if he has a hard time tackling you, you've got something good about you. How are you seeing the receivers? A lot of guys coming back. Of course, always thoughts Chris Lewis as he's going through what he's got going on. Landon Parker and Devontae Ross. I think last year too we talked about a lot about Chris Lewis. He has great catches, one-hand catches. Devontae Ross was doing it too. Physical receivers. But what's your thoughts on the Troy receivers?
Well, again, don't count Chris out. For those people, he had the cancer surgery during the offseason. Tough as nails. Right now, the focus is on him getting well. Every time I speak publicly about him, the focus is for him to get well. Mm-hmm. And if he never plays another down of football, which I'm not saying, but, that he's going to get his degree on scholarship and all that kind of stuff. But don't count him out, depending upon, the rehab and the he if anybody could do it, this is a kind of guy who has the talent and the intangibles to get it done. And if he can even approach what he looked like last year, what an asset he will be. But yeah, you mentioned Devontae Ross, an inside receiver, probably a guy who can step right in for the loss of Jabri Barber. Landon Parker, big physical outside receiver, reminded me a lot of Rajay Johnson from 2 years ago. Didn't get used a lot last year, but great catch radius, very strong. And you also look at a guy like Peyton Higgins, another inside receiver who's short, stocky, can go get him, can run, can also, do some things in the reverse game as well. Those are established guys. There's other guys to look out for, including a transfer from Oregon State named Zariah Beeson. Beeson is a guy who's looked really good in practice, looked really good in T-Day. And there's some other guys as well at wide receiver that could play a factor in there. A guy named, let's look. A guy like, some of the tight ends. Let's look at those. If you look at Ethan Connor from last year, he had the bad hand. There's going to be some weapons in the passing game for sure for this team. I'm just interested to see how they're going to be utilized.
And look at Coach Parker's history with tight ends at Notre Dame and all that stuff. He has a track record with tight ends. Defense. And that, we talked about the Jon Sumrall tenure, the 2 years, the Troy defense was just outstanding. And last year when we had this, I'm sure we talked about how do you replace Carlton Marshall? How do you fill that hole? And they did so. I mean, the defense are great, but I'm wondering about the pass, the pressure on the quarterback, getting after the quarterback. Richard Jubinor, and we mentioned Javon Solomon. They're not there anymore. You got linebacker Jordan Stringer coming back.
Yes.
They did some work in the secondary, but first, the pass rush. Who's some guys you think can kind of fill those shoes of those guys we mentioned?
Well, I mentioned Malachi Pegues. He hasn't done it, but Coach Sumrall, who knows edge rushers, really, really liked him. He showed flashes when he was used late in the year. There's a junior college guy who played a little bit last year, Raymond Cutts. Cutts is going to be not only, very very much counted on in terms of production, but also he's a leadership kind of guy. There's another guy who got hurt last year. He hurt his knee, had ACL surgery, missed the year. A guy named Phillip Lee out of Jacksonville, Florida, who I really liked. Another guy who is a culture guy. Eric Shaw from Reeltown, a South Carolina transfer a year ago. They're trying to figure out where he belonged. He was a special teams crazy man out there, but is he a bandit? Is he a tight end? He's 6'5" and slender. He's a guy that could factor in on the pass rush as well. But you also look at the linebackers, and some of those guys can rush the passer. I think at linebacker, you lose the guy from last year that went to Indiana and then moved on. But you got Jordan Stringer, you got Terry Thomas. You got Stephen Catledge, who got hurt early in the year, who was the number one tackler in junior college 2 years ago. I really, really like him. Those are guys who not only can plug a gap, but can also move really, really well. So, you look at those guys, maybe a TJ Thompson, maybe a Luke Hodge, guys like that. I do like the linebackers at Troy, despite, losing who they did, Jaden McDonald and some of those other guys.
Yeah, and obviously, when you get to the quarterback, I talk about this a lot with just anybody. When you get to the quarterback, that makes the secondary's job so much easier because it's kind of hard for the quarterback to complete a pass when he's, going toward the ground. So,
well, it's also hard for them to complete a pass. I saw this happen all the time last year where, you're taking the shotgun snap and immediately you're looking to see what Jibinor's doing. You're looking to see what Solomon's doing, because they're going to take up a little bit of your mindset. So even if they don't touch you, they're going to distract you a little bit. And so that's what Troy's kind of looking for again this year. It's what Coach Blakeney used to call the residual effect of contact.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure going into last year, a lot of Sunbelt quarterbacks that were returning is, okay, Marshall is gone, so we don't have to worry. And then they come and play Troy again. Said, wait, there's two of them over here now that I have to really keep an eye on. But kicking should not be an issue for him with Scott Taylor Renfro coming back. And that is always a good thing when you have reliable kickers such as him.
Yeah, I think he was second all time in number of field goals in a year at Troy. And I mean, he kicked them in the rain at Army, and he kicked them, at the end of games when they needed. He's another culture guy, another high quality young man who, with a year under his belt, you can only expect him to get that much better. The punting game, not only Robert Cole, who came in last year and did well, but also a Coastal Carolina transfer named Evan Crenshaw that could factor into it as well. Special teams is going to be it's going to be key for this team. And as far as the punter and the place kicker go, I like Troy's returning experience there. It's going to be interesting to see what they do in the return game, the punt return game. Peyton Higgins, maybe Devontae Ross, or who knows. But I like the special teams for sure.
So, real quickly, looking at the Troy schedule, I'm not going to, read off the whole thing, but interesting road visits. Of course, open at home with Nevada, go to Memphis, go to Iowa the second, third week of the season. Is there a certain game in there or a road trip that you're really looking forward to this season?
Well, we're looking forward to Iowa, that's for sure. It's week 2. Week 3. You don't want to overlook Nevada at home, and Memphis. Memphis is all that, especially at their place under their coach, and they really kind of got it rolling. But Iowa in week 3, Troy's never played Iowa. We played in Iowa before at Iowa State, but Gosh, they were good last year defensively. They didn't do anything on offense. That could be kind of a statement game for Troy. But then you look later on, you've got a couple of midweek games. South Alabama on that Tuesday, October 15th in Mobile. Golly, they'll be laying in wait. They've lost 6 in a row to Troy. They're sick to death of it. They've got a new coach as well. And then you look later on and you've got another midweek game coming up later on that really kind of, it really seems like it's a look ahead game. It's Texas State. It's at home. It's the week after ULM. Fans may be discounting that. It's on a Thursday night. But Texas State looks a lot different. I mean, they got Jordan McLeod. They've got, the Ismail Mahdi, the running back who rushed for 1,000 last year. Those were a couple of games in the middle of the year, in the middle of the week, that I don't think the Trojan fans need to sleep on at all.
Yeah, that was interesting. I plan on being at that one. I could share this on here as a recording. I'm hoping, because, I do the Dothan Wolves games down here. Well, last year, when Troy was playing South Alabama, me and some friends were going to go to the game. Well, that was the week of the National Peanut Festival starting down here in Dothan.
Right.
So they decided to move a lot of the games from Friday night to Thursday night. And then I was not able to make it to the game. So luckily that is nowhere near close to the National Peanut Festival hitting Dothan. And kind of just looking to just to sum about real quickly as we close up on Appalachian State. James Madison seemed like the favorites over there. And you look at this on a preseason magazine. You mentioned Texas State. A lot of people like them. Yeah. Louisiana seems like a team people like, but there's Troy. Just when you look at this, where do you see Troy stacking up?
Where Troy is right now and all of the preseason stuff, and not all of it is out yet, is familiar. Troy hasn't been picked at the top in either of the last 2 years, I don't think, but they got it done. Look, if I'm guessing out of the East right now, I'd say Appalachian State. Aguilar, the quarterback's really good. Plus, they got some continuity in the coaching staff. Sean Clark is back. Coastal Carolina, they lose Grayson McCall. They've got a second-year coach, James Madison, with a new coach, and they lose their quarterback out of the portal, but they get a good one. If I'm looking for a sleeper out of that division, I don't know what to think of Marshall, because they've got talent. They had talent, they beat Notre Dame. They've got talent. In the West, I like Troy. I've said some complimentary things about Texas State. Arkansas State, Troy beat them badly last year in Troy. They have really opened up they cracked open the transfer portal. They're going to look a lot different this year than they have in the past. The West should be wide open, but I do like Troy's positioning in this for sure. I think Troy will be in the thick of it at the very end.
Yeah, so a formula that seems to work for Troy is the media don't pick them. And then they start 1-2. If they start 1-2, look out, Sunbelt. That means the Trojans are about to go on a run that none of you are going to like. And something we didn't talk about too with Coach Parker. Troy has had success with Kentucky guys coming in as a head coach.
Yeah, it's funny because after Coach Blakeney, the hiring of Neil Brown, and I always tell people, nobody loves Coach Blakeney more than I do. But in terms of pushing Troy forward, nobody has had more of an impact on the program than Neil Brown has. And he did what he did in Troy. Had a 4-8 year his first year, kind of got it going. And then later on, Sumrall, who, like Neil, was a previous assistant here, has that Kentucky background and that Kentucky pedigree. Well, now Gerad Parker, who played at Kentucky, he's from Kentucky, good friends and coached with Sumrall and with Neil Brown. I doubt he would have been as interested in the job if he had not gotten such a glowing report about Troy from those coaches. But then again, they went to bat for him to come, on Troy's behalf as well. But he also, his defensive coordinator, Dante Wright, like Coach Parker, is from Louisa, Kentucky. There is quite still the Kentucky background for this program, and it's been awfully good for the Trojans, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I think we need to get like a series between Kentucky and maybe Troy in football or something, just because of those connections that have been there. I'm
You
just
know,
saying.
before the merger, before the the expansion of the SEC, I had broadcast from every SEC stadium. I broadcast play by play everywhere except for Vanderbilt and for Kentucky. So I'd love to see that. I've broadcast games from Lexington, basketball, women's basketball, baseball, but I've never done a football game there. Love to have that happen. That's for sure.
Well, if you ever do one to Vanderbilt, I'll guarantee there'll be more Troy fans there than there'll be Vanderbilt fans. So.
Yeah, I don't know that they'll ever be. It would suit them to put the Trojans on the schedule. I don't think they want to do that.
Probably not. But Barry, this has been fun. I probably kept a little bit longer than I probably mentioned I would, but it's been fun as always having you on talking all things Troy football, Troy athletics. But if the listeners, viewers, they want to follow you online, where can they find you?
Well, they can find us at troytrojans.com/listen. We've got 15 stations on our radio network. It's got a listing of those stations as well. We're also on the Troy Athletics app at Troy. You can get that online, Google Play, App Store, and all that kind of stuff. And like you said before, we have a lot of content. I've got interviews coming up on the Trojan Talk podcast with Candy Parker, the wife of Gerad Parker, who was a Hall of Fame basketball player in college and all that, and several other features we're going to be doing once Sunbelt Conference Media Days comes in. All that's available at troytrojans.com and on the Troy Athletics app. Lots of stuff.
All right, sounds good. Everybody go follow Barry. Go check out the Trojan Talk podcast. I know I'm a listener. It's a great listen, great interviews. And Barry, once again, I appreciate the time, and I look forward when we can do this again sometime down the road.
That sounds great. I enjoyed it.
96.9 The Legend is your connection to classic country legends. But Digio Strategies has other options too. News Talk 103.9 is your source for America's top news and entertainment shows, like Rick and Bubba in the morning, Glenn Beck from 9 till 11 a.m., and Clay Travis and Buck Sexton middays from 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. Sean Hannity, Lars Larson, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, and others fill your day with the latest news and views from America's top conservative voices. America at Night and Coast to Coast AM keep you company and connected throughout the night. Plus, Fox News, the Alabama Radio Network, and Wiregrass Daily News keep you informed with national, international, state, and local news. And with more musical choices like All the Hits, 106.7 KMX, Today's Country, 95.5 WTVY, and Music 107.7. Digio Strategies gives you more choices and more variety. Listen on air, online, and on our apps. 96.9 The Legend is just the beginning.
All right. Once again, thanks to Barry McKnight for being on the show. That was a lot of fun. We went about 30 minutes there, I think, with Barry. So I really appreciate him doing that. And we'll hopefully talk to Barry at some point during the season as well. SEC Media Days, by the way, before we jump into the Ask Me Anything part of the show, will be next week. So we'll be a lot on that. We're still kind of figuring out what my guest situation is going to be next week. Probably won't have anybody that covers any SEC team just because they're all going to be there in Texas SEC Media Days. So we'll have something guest-wise next week on the show, I promise. But won't be an SEC writer per se, just because they'll be out there doing their thing, covering all that. And the Sunbelt Media Days is coming up pretty soon too as well. So a lot of cool things are coming. But anyways, it's time for Ask Me Anything. Like I did last week, I went to social media, asked for questions. I got 3. And I'm pretty content, 3 to 5. That way this segment doesn't stay too long, especially when we do have a guest. So let's jump into it. Of course, this is not a live podcast, but if you want to get a question to me to talk about our topic or anything like that, to get onto the show, just send it in. Find me on social media at PJordanSEC. You can always email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. So let's jump into it. First up, we're going to go with Rhett Baxley, who had a question last week as well. 3 most improved teams, which I had to message back to Rhett on what sport to talk about. Because contrary to popular belief, we proved that earlier this week when we talked soccer, that this is not just a football show, predominantly, but not just. But anyways, 3 most improved teams, and he did mean college football in that. So I weighed on this, and I'm not necessarily going to say I think these are overall going to be the 3 most improved teams in college football, but 3 improved teams in college football when you look through it. And I'm going to go actually first off with Miami. And if you'd asked me this question probably last week, I probably wouldn't even bring this team up. But the Hurricanes, I think this will be a very improved team with 7-6 last year. I think they're improving at quarterback, going from Cam Ward, from Tyler Van Dyke. Tyler Van Dyke was just not trustworthy. He made bad decisions in crucial times. He just would have some bad games. He had some good games, but just up and down. I think you're going to find more consistency with quarterback Cam Ward. Threw for almost 7,000 yards in the last 2 years with Washington State, 48 touchdowns. He takes care of the ball. Last season, 67% completion percentage, 3,735 yards, 25 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He scored 8 on the ground as well. And when you look at what Miami has at wide receiver, 2 of the best in the ACC, 2 of the top 5 receivers from last year coming back. By the way, I have an article up at Last Word College Football where I look at the best returning receivers in the ACC, part of our continuing series looking at the best returning players in college football. Xavier Restrepo and Jacoby George, 2 of the best receivers in the league. You have both of them. They have weapons all over the place. We'll see what to do with running back. And defensively, they should be good. They have a lot of guys coming back. They also dipped to the portal. They were a decent defense last year. I think Miami could be a team. I'm not saying Miami is going to win the ACC. I do see this team could be the 3rd team behind Clemson, and that'd be Miami just because what they're able to do. And you look at their schedule. Like I said, they went 7-6 last season. I think this is a team that can win 9 games. I'll open up with Florida, at Florida. This is a big game for Miami and Florida. I really think this could really tell the future of the programs or the coach at these programs. Mario Cristobal, Billy Napier. Billy Napier has to have a big year. He's not had a winning season. Went 6-7 the first year. They lost a bowl game. Of course, that was Anthony Richardson's season. And then last year, this team didn't make a bowl game. Went 5-7. Then you got Florida A&M, Ball State, South Florida, Virginia Tech, and at Cal. Now, the at Cal trip just going out there is going to be tough, and it's just so weird that that's an ACC conference game. But still, I think that'll be tough, but all these games are winnable. So Miami could start the year 6-0. Then you go to Louisville. We'll see how that team is. They got to replace some players. Have Florida State at home, play Duke, at Georgia Tech, Wake, and then at Syracuse. So this team, there's 9 games here they can win. Now, a lot of it comes down to Mario Cristobal's got to learn late game management, but if he does that, if he doesn't, make decisions that result in losses for this team, I do think Miami has an opportunity to do some things. I know people are about to get on to me about this next one. They say, well, yeah, of course you're going to say that's the team you cover. That's the team you're right about. Okay. I think Auburn. Auburn was 6-7 last year. I think Auburn can win 9 games as well. I fully believe that. A lot of it comes down to quarterback Peyton Thorne. Can he just be a distributor of the football? He does not have to be great. He does not have to be a superhero. But there's going to be talent around him. The running back room, Jarquez Hunter, Damari Alston, Jeremiah Cobb. These are all guys that should be really good at the running back position for this team. There's no reason why they shouldn't be. And then you add, and of course, we're still thoughts and prayers with Brian Battie and his recovery from his deal with the gunshot wound. Then the receivers, of course, we know Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, the top 2. I mean, those are 5 stars. They got others coming, obviously. Then he went in the portal, got Robert Lewis, I think a very reliable receiver coming to you from Georgia State. Keandre Lambert-Smith from Penn State. This was Penn State's best receiver last year. This guy could be a really star. And if Cam Coleman turns into a star, now you have a guy on the other side opposite him. That also is going to put fear into defenses. And Rivaldo Fairweather is a guy a lot of people probably aren't even talking about, tight end. He was Peyton Thorne's favorite target last season. And this is a guy that has NFL potential as a pass-catching tight end. Probably not as much as a blocking tight end, but pass-catching. And then they address the needs offensive line, defensive line. They're going to be better up front this year. Linebacker, Eugene Asante, he's coming back. I'm really happy about that. I think the team has a playmaker there. Secondary, they have talent, but there's a little bit more experience. They lost a lot of guys last year. But I do believe Auburn has the potential to be a very dangerous team. It can go 9-3. But, again, it kind of all centers back to Peyton Thorne. And staying in the SEC, another team that I think can do some things. That's going to be Texas A&M. Another team 7-6 last year. Trying to stay with that thing. I did want to take a 3-9. Okay, 3-9 and 6-6. Okay, that's improved, but let's have some fun here. So let's go with 6-7 win teams. See if they can get that 9 win potential team. If you get to 9, you're potentially knocking on. You are knocking on the door of 10 wins. You're one under Mike Elko. I think there'll be less pressure, less scrutiny on Texas A&M because Jimbo Fisher's not there, and just those lofty expectations that were Jimbo Fisher. Quarterback Connor Wigman is coming back. If he stays healthy, he can be one of the best quarterbacks in the conference. They have solid receivers. We know the defense will be good as well. And their schedule is very favorable. Georgia, Alabama, and Ole Miss are not on their schedule. And some of their big tests like Missouri, LSU, Texas, they're all at home. And how great is it to have Texas A&M versus Texas on the football schedule again? Let's just salivate with that. That is awesome. But so you have Notre Dame in the opener at home. That's going to be big primetime. ABC, you win that one. You got McNeese at Florida. We'll see where Florida's at. I just say that Miami-Florida game is going to dictate. If Florida loses that one, I can see this team going off the rails very early on. Bowling Green, Arkansas. So you beat Notre Dame. You should win those other ones, I think. So you could be 5-0. Missouri's going to be tough. At Mississippi State, you should beat Mississippi State. That's your 6 wins. LSU, I think it'll be a fun matchup. And you got them at home. At South Carolina, you should beat them. New Mexico State, you should beat them. This is not the same New Mexico State team that beat Auburn last year. Their quarterback and their coach is now at Vanderbilt. And you add Auburn, that's going to be tough going to Jordan-Hare in your home with Texas. This, I think 8 wins should be the floor. 9 wins is possible, and you never know if certain things do shake out. I think A&M could get to 10 wins this coming in. For sure, 9, 10 could happen. You never know. Again, like I said, if you get the 9, you're knocking on the door of 10. Of course, I'm not even factoring in bowl games with these teams, of course. All right, next up, just a little bit for fun question. And my next 2 questions are actually from colleagues over at Last Word on College Football. Craig McMichael, what's your advice for Oklahoma fans when they visit Jordan-Hare this season? Pre-game meal, tailgate, and in-game experience. Of course, the first SEC road game for the Sooners will be at Auburn, week 5. That'll be a big game for Auburn. I didn't really go into the Auburn schedule. Auburn has the chance to start 4-0. I really think they can do that. Let's kind of just look back since I didn't do it in the last question. Alabama and A&M, Cal, New Mexico, and Arkansas all should be wins. And if you beat Oklahoma, you're 5-0. But that's the first one there. That's going to be a big game. And then Auburn has Georgia next. But Auburn could be top 10 if they beat Oklahoma in this game. But back to Craig's question, which was pregame meal, tailgate, and in-game experience. So maybe this is probably not the popular pick. This is probably not what a lot of people pick that go to Auburn games regularly. Let's be honest. Let's pull back the curtain. I don't go to a lot of games. I will go to a Troy game that happens during the week because, look, we're here in Dothan. I'll do that. But I don't go to a lot of Auburn games. I just don't do it. I prefer to be at home and just watch all the games at home. That's just how I am. But I think Chappie's Deli is a real good spot to hit. Great sandwiches. The banana pudding is awesome. Love it. I absolutely love it. Tailgate, I just get there early and have fun. That's all I got to say. In game, look, this is more of the Auburn stuff. I mean, obviously, Tiger Walk is awesome. I mean, I say I don't go to a lot of games, but I have been to games, and I know what the environment is like, especially at night. And also, you look at it too with this Tiger Walk, the Eagle, just the inch, everything. The atmosphere is just amazing there at Auburn. So let's go to the final question, and this is one of my favorites. Kevin McGuffey, because he covers Kentucky over at Last Word College Football, does a great job with our bowl predictions throughout the year too as well. Thoughts on the Packers this year? Of course, he knows I am a Packers fan. Of course, anybody watching on YouTube or video anywhere can obviously see the Green Bay Packers helmet behind me. Big Packers fan. Well, how will they do? I think the Packers are winning the NFC North. And people laugh at me and say, oh, man, what about the Detroit Lions? They had such a great year last year, and they bring people back. Jared Goff, this team should be ready to go. But I'll say this. I predicted the Packers to make the playoffs going into last year. I said I think Jordan Love has got the ability. I think they got good players around him. And I said the Packers would make the playoffs. And I had a lot of people laugh at me about that. And I said I've been through this before. I saw the transition from Favre to Rodgers, now Rodgers to Love. I've seen it before. I think Love has the ability to be really good, and he did have a really good year. Now, he's going to have to take that next step. There's a full season of tape on him. So what is he going to add to his game? And the receivers, I want to see somebody for sure step out as the number one guy. Jaden Reed, I think, could be the guy. Romeo Dobbs makes a big catch. Dontavian Wicks was a guy that came out of nowhere. Christian Watson, he could be the guy, but stay healthy. He is very productive when he's on the field and healthy, but that's not been always the case with him. And he had last year 2 rookie tight ends, Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, both making big plays. And they have 4 offensive linemen returning. The offense should be really good, especially with the passing game. Look at running back. Aaron Jones is gone. He's now with the Minnesota Vikings. The Packers released him. Josh Jacobs coming in, former Raider. This is a guy that's put up a lot of yards. I think second just to Derrick Henry since 2019. A.J. Dillon comes back. So you've got that duo there. Josh Jacobs is a threat and as a pure running back. And also, if you want to use him as a wide receiver, kind of like Aaron Jones. And I kind of get where the Packers went with this. Aaron Jones is a guy that, look, he was productive when he's on the field, kind of like we're talking about Christian Watson, but he's getting older. Injuries have been a thing with him. I hope he does well. He was a great Packer, model Packer. I mean, it's what you want. Defensively, they've got good guys coming. Look, defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley coming over. He was the Boston College head coach. Left that job to be the Packers defensive coordinator, which is something we could see college coaches doing. Defensive front, just going to name a few guys. Kenny Clark, Devontae White. These are playmakers up front. Quay Walker's going to lead that linebacker crew. Another talent. They added depth in the draft, really like that. Let's see, Jair Alexander had an up and down year. Wasn't his best year last year, but we still know he's a really top-level cornerback in the National Football League. And then they signed Xavier McKinney to shore up the safety position. So the Packers have the players in place to win the NFC North, which I think they're going to do. I think the Lions are a playoff contender, but I think they take a step back because now last year, I wouldn't say they surprised a lot. A lot of people thought they're going to be that team, but can they continue that success? We just haven't seen that franchise do that. And then I think the Bears are going to they're building with Caleb Williams, which anybody knows me, I'm not high on. I think the Vikings will take a step back. Not quite sure how good they're going to be just because of the quarterback situation. Kirk Cousins is in now in Atlanta. Is J.J. McCarthy the guy you drafted? You bring Sam Darnold in as a free agent. I just don't know. So, yeah, I think the Packers will win the NFC North. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Phillip Jordan Show. Again, thanks to Barry McKnight for coming on the show. Had a lot of fun talking to him as always. We will be back next week with some more sports talk. And hope everybody has a great weekend. Be back on Monday. We'll have another edition of the Wiregrass High School Football Report. And I'll be back in this spot talking all things sports outside of the high school football stuff. And if you're in the Dustin area, Thursday night, I'll be there, sidelines, taking pictures for Wiregrass Daily News. Dustin United, they're friendly. Go check it out. 7 o'clock, Repute Stadium. And then Saturday night, big game, potentially playoff implications for the Dustin United soccer team there. So 7 o'clock on Thursday night, 7 o'clock on Saturday night too. So should be a lot of fun. And then, of course, next week we'll get into SEC Media Days and stuff like that. But anyways, again, appreciate everybody checking it out, and everybody take care.